somebody had gone into the Blues and edited out those comments to appear in the official Hansard. And that undermines our freedom of speech here, as well as our privilege as parliamentarians. And that is, in my opinion, has done with intent, and is definitely a contempt of Parliament.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. As all of you know, Greg Fergus landed himself in hot water yesterday when he ejected Pierre Poilievre and Rachel Thomas from the House of Commons during question period, and he drew the ire from many in the media, with some calling for his resignation. Well, that hot water has now been brought to a full boil after what happened in the House of Commons today, with accusations of doctoring parliamentary records and proof that Fergus violated the privilege of Rachel Thomas.
Let's take a look.
I now recognize the honourable member from Lethbridge, who has given notice for a question of privilege.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of privilege today regarding a significant discrepancy between what was published in the Blues and what was published in Hansard of yesterday. The question of privilege that I raise also has to do with how I was treated by the Speaker of this House and how I was further portrayed publicly.
Okay, so before we get into this, this is very interesting because off camera yesterday when we were watching this unfold in the House of Commons, when we were recording yesterday, Fox and I were actually discussing, wouldn't it be interesting if one of Pierre or Rachel actually raised a question of privilege against Greg Fergus because of his bias, because he was impeding their parliamentary right and ability to actually carry out their job. So when I was watching this, off the side of my desk while working, and this started to happen, I was in shock. I was in literal shock, and I ran downstairs, hobbled downstairs and said to Fox, "Oh my God, like Rachel, she's doing it. And Fox like, "What is she doing?" And I said, "Raising the question of privilege," and she was as equally shocked as I was that it actually happened. But
yeah, it was crazy. I didn't understand what Cypher was talking about at first. I was outside waiting for our son to come off the bus from school, and then we had to run off and take him to therapy. So this is the first opportunity we've had to sit down and have a really good, solid look. A lot of this is new to me. Cypher has seen a good chunk of it, but we're going to break it down for you. Two things that Rachel has mentioned already, just in that brief intro, was parliamentary privilege. So what is parliamentary privilege? Parliamentary privilege refers to the rights and immunities that are deemed necessary for the House of Commons as an institution and its members as representatives of the electorate to fulfill their functions. It also refers to the powers possessed by the House to protect itself, its members, and its procedures from undue interference so that they can carry out effectively their principal functions, which are to legislate, deliberate, and hold the government to account.
so what does that mean? Well, what it essentially means is in order for parliamentarians, members of parliament, to do their job properly, they need to have certain rights that are unimpeded for them to actually do that job. So they can question other people in committees, question people of the government, and do things like vote and that sort of thing. So you may recall Michael Chong when he raised a question of privilege because he found out that the People's Republic of China were actually threatening him and his family because of a vote that he cast in opposition to something that China was doing. So that is a question of privilege. Now, the thing around raising a question of privilege is
that you are required to raise it as soon as feasible to the House of Commons.
So you and if you don't, then you kind of miss your window of raising that. But just about every parliamentarian raises this as a question of privilege as soon as they hear of it. So Rachel, on the very next day, at the very first opportunity, which is after question period ended and they had a couple of votes, this is her first opportunity to raise it. So let's hear what she has to say.
The discrepancy between the blues and what was published in the Hansard is the omission of two words, two very important documented words. An exchange between the Speaker and me during question period yesterday. The blues recorded the following statement by the Speaker. I quote directly. If the honourable member for Lethbridge has problems with the chair, she should challenge the chair in a respectful way. But as the honourable member knows, challenging the chair is against the rules of this House. I ask the honourable member to please withdraw her remarks.
Okay, so in order to continue any further, you keep hearing Rachel refer to something called the blues. So the question is, what is the blues?
So in order to explain what the blues is, first we need to explain what Hansard is. Many of you who have been with us for a while know that we will often use this term when we're referring to the record. So what happens in Parliament, obviously it's recorded, we see it on video camera, but they also record it like in written format, and that then becomes Hansard. So the blues are kind of like the initial written format of it, and then it is sent to a committee or a group of people known as Hansard that will edit it to make it functional and readable. And they also correct things like translation errors, dates, just things that need minor correction. They will remove, if a speaker is saying like a lot, they'll remove that from the record. So they'll take what's called the blues, which is like the original undoctored version, and then they'll clean it up, and then it goes and becomes parliamentary record or
right.
Hansard.
So you may not get it exactly word for word in some cases. In most cases, you will see in Hansard, but they'll clean it up so it's easy to read and understand.
Now, changes to Hansard can be made. If you recall back after Rhoda had welcomed the SS soldier into the House of Commons, Karina Gold had said she wanted it stricken from the record, and the Conservatives were against it. That's because it was a very significant thing, and they didn't want it removed from the record of Parliament. In order to remove something from the record of Parliament in that manner, you need to have unanimous consent of all parties involved. Sometimes you might get a case where a slight error was made, but it still changes the meaning of what's going on. For example, you could have an MP talking about a constituent named John Smith, but in actuality the constituent's name is Jim Smith, and they would like that Hansard corrected to reflect the proper name. So they have to put in a request for an edit. It doesn't just happen.
To which I replied, and rose in my space, to say this, quote, Mr. Speaker, I stated that the chair is acting in a disgraceful manner. I withdraw. In the Hansard recording, two words are missing. The words, I withdraw.
Wow.
That said, it should be noted that it is reported in Hansard that at least one member did point out to the Speaker that these words, in fact, were spoken.
So, let's fact check this, shall we? So we're going to go back to Tuesday, April 30th, 2024. Edited Hansard number 305. So this is what we're looking at for yesterday. Now, the section in which we're looking at is down here. Now, these numbers here, this is the timestamp. So this is military time. So this is 2:25 in the afternoon. So let's go through. The Speaker, order please. If the honourable member for Lethbridge has problems with the chair, she should challenge the chair. But as the honourable member knows, challenging the chair is against the rule of the House. I ask the honourable member to please withdraw her remarks. Mrs. Rachel Thomas, Mr. Speaker, I stated that the chair is acting in a disgraceful manner. Dash. Now, she said also after that, I withdraw, but those are missing from here. But she also stated that it was captured in Hansard that one of her colleagues had said that she withdrew. Is that correct? Yes, it is. If we keep going, we see the Speaker, Mrs. Thomas, I must name you for disregarding the authority of the chair. One of her colleagues, she withdrew it. So Right now, everything Rachel Thomas is bringing to the Speaker's attention and to Parliament's attention is factually correct. And this is starting to get disturbing because of what this implies.
It says under the heading, an honorable other member, it says the following, quote, she withdrew it. In the audio recording, many other members were heard drawing attention to this fact, asking for the Speaker to do the same. These words, Mr. Speaker, are significant because they demonstrate that I complied with the Speaker, your request to withdraw. It demonstrates that my withdrawal was not conditional, but rather it was proper and textbook. Therefore, it ought to have been accepted.
So what is Rachel Thomas saying here? This is the key point. Because Fergus is saying yesterday, he's naming her and throwing her out because he is saying that she was defying the order of the chair. Well, if she withdrew her comment, then she is not in fact defying the order of the chair. She was complying with it. So if you play this out, Fergus says, if you want to challenge the chair, you have to challenge the chair in a respectful manner, and then I ask the honourable member to withdraw her remarks. And then what Rachel Thomas says is, I stated the chair is acting in a disgraceful manner, and I withdraw, therefore complying. And immediately after that, Fergus ignores the fact that she withdrew and kicks her out anyway. That is a breach of privilege. And this means that this is real serious, and the perception of bias that happened yesterday from Greg Fergus shoots up to a whole new level. Because he kicked out a member of Parliament that was complying with his direction. Let's take a listen to what happened yesterday.
The honourable member from Lethbridge, if she has problems with the chair, that she should challenge the chair in a way. But as she knows, as the honourable member from Lethbridge knows, that by challenging the chair is against the rules of this House. I'll ask the honourable member to please to ask her to withdraw her remarks.
The chair is acting in a disgraceful manner.
I'm going to ask you, will you...
Did you hear it?
I heard it. I withdraw.
Right.
Listen again.
The chair is acting in a disgraceful manner.
I'm going to ask you, will you...
So you could hear it. And here's the thing. He would have heard it better than us because she was looking right at him when she was speaking.
Well, and he would have seen her mouth moving.
Right. Right. So if Fergus was actually, doing his job, he would have actually probably seen that or noticed that. Or maybe he did notice and didn't care because he didn't like what she said.
Right, his ego was bruised.
So let's continue.
Yet, I was kicked out of this place for the remainder of the day, as if I hadn't withdrawn those words, or to put it another way, as if Hansard recording of the event was accurate and true, when in fact, Mr. Speaker, we know it is not. If you were to check the audio recording, it clearly picked up the two words that are also recorded in the blues. It is worth noting that in Chapter 24 of Bosch and Gagnon, it states, quote, the chamber is equipped with cameras operated from a control room, invisible from the floor of the House. The recording of the proceedings is governed by guidelines intended to preserve the concept of the electronic Hansard, as adopted by the House. The two words, Mr. Speaker, that were edited out of the Hansard essentially rewrote history, making the actions and procedure followed by the Speaker, you, appear proper and mine improper.
So this is very, very important. Now, you may hear the different members of Parliament talk about Bosch and Gagnon. So what that is the House of Commons procedure and practice. So that's what that is. So it's basically the instruction manual with all of the rules for Parliament. And when they say referring to Bosch and Gagnon, they're basically just referring to all of the standing orders and the procedures that are followed within the House, because that's where they go to double check different procedures, if people are following the rules of the House properly, and it allows them to double check themselves to ensure that people are complying. That's what she's referencing here. So when you're looking at this, she's saying that the automated program, the Blues, picked up her words, and then somehow that didn't make it into Hansard.
And as we know, what's in the Blues is then edited and transcribed into Hansard before it's published to the public.
As long as it doesn't change the meaning. So when the Blues captures Rachel Thomas saying, "I stated that I find the conduct of the speaker disgraceful, I withdraw," removing "I withdraw" completely changes the meaning of that, because that was her response to the Speaker of the House. And as she said, that completely changes the optics of that interaction, because that makes what the Speaker is doing all of a sudden correct. Versus if she is recorded by saying, "I withdraw,"
then the Speaker has no reason to kick her out.
then the Speaker's completely wrong in doing what he did. So this is incredibly important.
As you know, I was removed from the chamber for the remainder of the day, and I was prohibited from being able to participate in debate or vote on behalf of the constituents who have sent me here. Therefore, the constituents of Lethbridge were robbed of having a presence and a voice in the House of Commons, their democratic right. It was especially egregious given the fact that there was a scheduled vote immediately following question period that day. If you go to the House of Commons site, the Blues, unfortunately, are no longer available. Interesting. Which makes a person curious as to why. If you attempt to access the Blues today, you will get this message, quote, "Blues are available while the House is in session until the Hansard is published." The Blues are taken down. Luckily, though, Mr. Speaker, for you, I kept a copy of those Blues that were sent to me yesterday at the end of the day, and I have them available to submit to you here.
Interesting.
And I will just point out that if we flip through them, on this page here, you can see my words are kindly highlighted for you.
Wow.
Oh,
Was that Caputo in the background?
that was Caputo and Brock right behind her. Wow. Rachel just bringing the hammer down on Fergus. I wonder what Fergus's expression is right now, because we can't see it. But he must be like, oh, crap.
I hope he has a good poker face.
I hope he has a change of underwear.
Obstruction.
Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, we are fortunate to also have access to the audio recording, which still exists and does not lie.
It's real funny, isn't it?
She is
Hilarious.
At pages 1228 to 1229 of the third edition of House of Commons Procedure and Practice, it states, quote, "The unedited in extenso transcripts of the debates at one time produced on blue paper continue to be known as the Blues. Parliamentary publications staff send to each member who speaks in the House the transcription of the member's intervention. The Blues are also published on the House of Commons internal website. The availability of the Blues on the House of Commons internal website permits members and their authorized delegates to use the webpage or email to submit suggested changes for parliamentary publications editorial staff to consider. Members may suggest corrections to errors and minor alterations to the transcription, but may not make material changes to the meaning of what was said in the House." I'm going to read that part again because it's really important. They may not make material changes to the meaning of what was said in the House. So it's interesting then that the Blues said one thing, but Hansard said another, and I did not ask for those changes to be made.
This is very, very significant.
Yeah, it's serious, folks. This is parliamentary record. You don't mess around with that.
No, if you want to change the parliamentary record, if it's in a very significant way, you need unanimous consent of the House.
Right. So,
which this was a very significant way.
Yeah. So removing something like this, exactly, Fox. Removing something like this, you would need the unanimous consent of every member of Parliament in the House of Commons, because this is not just an edit. It's not a correction. It is a complete removal of a statement that completely changes the perception of what occurred at that point in time during that session. What it shows is that Rachel Thomas was being a spoiled little brat and wasn't listening to the speaker, and the speaker was justified in removing her from the House.
But the reality is that she did withdraw her statement and was kicked out anyways.
Right. And she wasn't repeating the statement to be inflammatory. She was saying, this is what I'd stated, and yes, I will withdraw it.
It's proper procedure, really.
The third edition of the House of Commons procedure goes on to say this: it is a long-standing practice of the House that editors of the debates may exercise judgment as to whether or not changes suggested by members constitute the correction of an error or a minor alteration. The editors may likewise alter a sentence to render it more readable, but may not go so far as to change its meaning. Editors must ensure that the debates are a faithful reflection of what was said. Any changes made, whether by the members or editors, are for the sole purpose of improving the readability of the text, given the difference between the spoken and written word. End quote. Clearly, Mr. Speaker, I did not suggest any changes to the officials with regard to Hansard. Bosch and Gagnon state that the editors can make alterations but cannot make changes that go so far as to change the meaning of what was said. In the case I raised today, the significant difference in meaning without these two words, I withdraw, being published in Hansard obviously is very significant. On page 1229, it goes on to say, when a question arises in the House as to the accuracy of the record, it is the responsibility of the Speaker to look into the matter. In this case, the edit, otherwise known as the deletion of two very significant words, is far more noteworthy than simply improving the readability of a sentence. I believe you'll agree. The justification used by the Speaker to admonish and remove me from the chamber does not match the evidence presented in the blues and by the audio recording that you may also access. The Speaker's actions do, however, fit very nicely with the altered text published in the Hansard. On page 82 of Bosch and Gagnon, it describes a list of items to be considered a contempt, and on that list is, quote, falsifying or altering any papers belonging to the House, end quote. At page 248 of Joseph Magnon's Parliamentary Privilege in Canada, second edition, it states, quote, the House of Commons of Canada remains prepared to entertain legitimate questions of privilege where false or perverted reports of debates or proceedings are published, end quote. While this passage refers to inaccurate media reports of what was published in Hansard, it is no less offensive, and in fact perhaps more offensive, that this happened right here in the House of Commons. At pages 81 to 83 of Bosch Gagnon, it states, and I quote, throughout the Commonwealth, most procedural authorities hold that contempts, as opposed to privileges, cannot be enumerated or categorized. Speaker Sauvé explained in a 1980 ruling, while our privileges are defined, contempt of the House has no limits. When new ways are found to interfere with our proceedings, so too will the House, in appropriate cases, be able to find that a contempt of the House has occurred. Just as it is not possible to categorize or to delineate every incident which may fall under the definition of contempt, it is also difficult to categorize the severity of contempt. Contempts may vary greatly in their gravity, Matters ranging from minor breaches of decorum to grave attacks against the authority of Parliament may be considered as contempts." End quote.
So Rachel has said a lot there, and the implication and the undertone that she is carrying with her while she's speaking is that either the speaker or someone else decided to make that change in Hansard from the Blues transcription in favor of Greg Fergus, so that it puts Greg Fergus in a good light. That's a contempt. And that's why she is now talking about what contempt could be.
Well, and as she said, contempt can be any numerous things. As they find new egregious things that happen, they can be classified as contempt. For example, Christian Firth was summoned to the bar because he was in contempt of Parliament for not providing those documents that were requested in committee. That's
Right.
a contempt.
And she was even citing an example from one of the parliamentary handbooks stating that if a news report was, I would say, well, she used the word perverted or changed. Perverted meaning a negative change, like change in a negative way, and that ended up in Hansard, that would be contempt of Parliament. And she then went on to elaborate that while, that was specifically talking about news reports, this is actually much worse because it happened inside the House of Commons from what a parliamentarian was saying. So, this is serious, folks. This is not going well for Greg Fergus or his Speaker's office.
Mr. Speaker, it cannot be debated or disputed that someone deliberately removed 2 words from the Blues, and that these 2 words have great significance. It cannot be debated or disputed that it therefore changed the meaning of the events yesterday and the way that they would be interpreted, thus resulting in an inaccurate negative reflection of me, which was then broadcasted to my constituents and to all people across Canada. Furthermore, this inaccurate account of events resulted in my wrongful dismissal from this place by you.
And that's the breach of parliamentary privilege right there. Because as she said earlier, she wasn't able to vote, she wasn't able to debate, she wasn't able to participate in the scheduled events in the House of Commons that she was supposed to be there, acting on behalf of her constituent.
That's right. Mrs. Thomas wasn't able to do the job that she was elected by her constituents to do because Greg Fergus made an error in throwing her out.
Right. He got all mad because someone was disagreeing with him and saying nasty things about his conduct, justifiably so, might we add. And so he got all hot under the collar and threw her out.
Thus robbing me of the right to represent the constituents of Lethbridge here in the House of Commons and to cast a vote on their behalf. Again, robbing them of their democratic right. Which leads to another aspect of privilege, and that is improper reflections upon a member. On October 20th, 1966, the member for Edmonton Strathcona rose on a question of privilege that came out of an article in Le Droit of October 14th by Marcel Pepin. He argued that the article imputed an improper motive to him and was a gross distortion of the facts of something that occurred in the House. The Speaker ruled the matter to be a prima facie question of privilege on October 24th, 1966. In my case, it is the Hansard that has recorded a gross distortion of the facts, an act that can be substantiated by the Blues and the audio recordings of the procedures I referred to from yesterday, April 30th.
Okay, so you've heard this term before. It's a Latin term. It's called, some people say Primafacie, some people say Primafacie, but however they're pronouncing it, I believe the proper pronunciation is Primafacie. What that means is if the Speaker rules that to be a prima facie case, that means it's accepted as true or correct unless somebody proves it otherwise. Like prima facie is translated to as on the first impression. So this is what happens when a MP raises a question of privilege. The speaker then rules if it's prima facie, meaning, do I accept that, yes, this is a potential breach of privilege? So there's no debate here. And she has come with a lot of good evidence. Now she's citing an example from the 60s where a news article mischaracterized an event that happened within the House of Commons. Well, how is that relating to what she's talking about now? Because you have the blues being mistranslated into Hansard, or mistranscribed into Hansard, that completely impugns her character within the House of Commons. It's basically the same thing. And someone deliberately did that.
I will give another example. On March 22nd, 1983, Speaker Sauvé ruled on a question of privilege relating to false and libelous accusations against the member for Lincoln that had been published in the Montreal Gazette. The Speaker felt that a reflection upon the reputation of an honourable member is a matter of great concern to all members of the House. And the Speaker said at that time, quote, "It places the entire institution under a cloud, as it suggests that among the members of the House there are some who are unworthy to sit there. An allegation of criminal or other dishonourable conduct inevitably affects the member's ability to function effectively while the matter remains unresolved." End quote. Mr. Speaker, the matter I am addressing today is grave in nature and calls for your utmost attention. In summary, the matter I am bringing to your attention today has three components. 1, the Speaker's ruling to expel me from the House. 2, the improper alteration of the Hansard. And 3, the inaccurate reporting as to the role that I played here in this place. Mr. Speaker, if you rule this matter to be a prima facie question of privilege, I am prepared to move the appropriate motion today.
And here's the problem, because, again, all of this goes to the root, which is Greg Fergus's bias. Now, what an honorable guy should do is accept the evidence, say, so I didn't hear what you said, I was in the wrong. So that's the first thing that should happen. And the second thing is that he should accept it, and then I will complete an investigation to find out who changed that. Now, there's going to be lots of postulation of, well, obviously Fergus was the one who had them change it. We don't have evidence of who changed it. We can guess, we can estimate, but we don't have evidence of who did that.
I think, honestly, he should step aside and let d'Entremont rule whether it's prima facie or not.
You would think, because
he's clearly
conflict of
embroiled.
interest.
Fergus is embroiled in the middle of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Conflict of interest. And Fergus stepped aside the first time, if we all recall. He stepped aside the first time to allow d'Entremont to carry out the duties of Speaker while stuff was going on in committee about evaluating whether or not Greg Fergus acted in a partisan manner when he was taking videos of him in his freaking robes and saying at the Liberal conventions. But, you know.
I thank the honourable member. I thank the honourable member from Lethbridge for raising this matter of question of privilege. I do encourage her, please, to share all the information that she would like to have the speakership to evaluate, and certainly we will take this with extreme importance.
We will take this with extreme importance.
Well, here's the thing about a question of privilege, is it is most important above all other business of the House. So when a question of privilege is raised, all the other business of the House for the day stops until it's addressed.
Yeah, because it's a threat to Parliament, even if it's just a single MP. So, you know, now he'll take this back and investigate this and rule on it. So, you know, she's done her presentation. They'll take any comments on it, and then when the comments are done, they close the matter off, and then they proceed to orders of the day. But you know, this took up a significant amount of time in the House because she had to raise it, and then, you know, the Speaker then has to rule on it at some point. So Anyhow, so they did get to comments, and there was, of course, there was some supporting comments raised by Conservative members, but someone stood up, and I was quite surprised to see this person stood up. And it is significant because they don't sit on the same side of the House as the Conservatives.
Member from Sandwich Gulf Islands who wants to rise to comment on the question of privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's difficult to keep track, but I was very distressed by the additional information that was just provided by the honourable member from Lethbridge. I'm sure all of us in this place know how critically important it is that we have no question in our minds as to the accuracy of Hansard. I want to stop for a moment and thank the various staff people who make it possible to have verbatim transcripts of everything we say in this place and give us a chance to correct the record if we absolutely have been misunderstood in the Hansard between the Blues, which are the unofficial transcript for those who might be watching on CPAC, and the actual Hansard. It's critical that there never be any question as to the accuracy of Hansard in recording our remarks in this place.
So, Elizabeth May standing up in defense of Rachel Thomas. Very, very interesting. This is 2 times she's kind of said the right thing in the last little while. What's going on with Elizabeth May? But I applaud anyone who is on the right side. So I give her due. I disagree with many of her politics, but she is showing some integrity by standing up on the right side of this issue right now. Now, unrelated to this, just for some general interest, if you look behind Elizabeth May, you'll actually see a lady behind a pane of glass talking in the microphone. Who's that, Fox?
That's the interpreter.
That's where the interpreters sit and relay everything that the MPs are talking about through the microphones. So they have English translators and French translators. So now you know where they sit. Now you know how they talk. Let's get back to Elizabeth May.
So, Mr. Speaker, I know that the honourable member for Lethbridge, who happens to be a friend of mine, but that's neither here nor there, I know that she said there could be no other explanation for the changes between what she said, and I accept her word on that, and what appears in Hansard. I always leave open the possibility for an innocent explanation of somebody making an error, but I don't think we can leave this matter where any assumptions are made of what happened. I urge you, Mr. Speaker, to investigate this thoroughly to ensure that none of us can have any doubts in our mind that what appears in Hansard is an accurate reflection of what members have said, and that there's no possibility of any interference from any quarter in the words spoken and the printed Hansard, that they are 100% in alignment with the truth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So, very good points by Elizabeth May. And she raises a really, really important point, because the MPs and the Canadian public, right, all of us, we have the ability to check Hansard, as you've seen us do on a couple of occasions. We showed it to you again today. We have to know that that's accurate.
We have to know that nobody is going in after the fact and changing our history.
Yeah, because you can go back a long time. A long, long time in the parliamentary record and see who said what and where.
Well, and that's how we got that clip of Mr. Stinson threatening a fight in the House of Commons.
Right. And we released a short video on X today, calling it the hypocrisy of Peter Julian, which we'll probably paste to our members today. It's not that long, and it's really not that important, but it is interesting. And the only way I was able to find that is via Hansard, because I knew that he had said something, and I was able to search for it, find the video clip, and then correspondingly show it to everybody. And that's why this is important.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to first of all just point out that I sit in rather close proximity to the member from Lethbridge and clearly heard her say here that she withdrew her comments. And I really am disturbed by the fact that someone went to the effort of withdrawing "I withdraw" as a quotation from the Hansard record itself. As a long-serving member, someone who wants to make sure that the historical record is correct, that is reflected in the Hansard. So I encourage your office to dig down and find out who made that change to the blues. That type of edit does change intent. Now, I can understand, Mr. Speaker, in the raucous that occurred yesterday in the House, that you may not have personally heard the comment, "I withdraw," but that doesn't excuse the fact that somebody had gone into the blues and edited out those comments to appear in the official Hansard. And that undermines our freedom of speech here, as well as our privilege as parliamentarians. And that is, in my opinion, has done with intent and is definitely a contempt of Parliament.
So, future Minister of Defense, James Bazan, his opinion is that this was not a mistake. This was intent, because as the blues are rolled over into Hansard, what he is saying is someone went into Hansard and would have had to delete "I withdraw." So that is what he is saying, and he is of opinion that this was a contempt of Parliament. He gives Greg Fergus the get out of jail free card of, well, maybe it was loud and you didn't hear, but there is no debate when it comes to Hansard, and there is no debate when it comes to the blues. So this investigation and the outcome of this is going to reveal, I think, once and for all, if Fergus is going to be staying as Speaker or if he's going to be forced to resign by the House, because I cannot see the Bloc and I cannot see the NDP siding with Fergus on a matter like this if he comes back and says, "Oh, nothing to see here." I don't think anyone can accept that.
Again, this is serious, and whether you like the Conservatives or you don't like them, that is completely irrelevant. The opposition has a very important role to play in our Parliament, which is to provide an opposite speaking voice to the government, to hold the government to account. And if our parliamentary record is being maliciously edited in a way that reflects poorly on the opposition, that is a breach of their parliamentary privilege, and Canadians should be concerned because they cannot do their job if their privilege is being breached.
This is serious because you have doctored parliamentary records, and the doctored parliamentary records paint a completely different picture of a biased speaker that has been called out for what he did to Pierre yesterday. Never mind what happened and was revealed today in Rachel Thomas's case. So now you have two distinct scenarios where Rachel Thomas should definitely not have been kicked out, and then there's great argument for Pierre not needing to be kicked out because he was also trying to comply with the Speaker. So this is not a week that Greg Fergus wants to remember, but I think it's sure as hell going to be a week that the Conservatives aren't going to let him forget.